Georgia 42, Kentucky 13, a final score from Athens on senior night there in Georgia with a number of notable seniors, including Sony Michel and Nick Chubb playing their final game at Sanford Stadium. We bring in Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football. He's going to break it down, especially from the Kentucky side, as the Wildcats drop to 7-4. So, Kevin, we appreciate, even though it's a tough loss to take, you jumping on board here.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me. As you said, it's a lot easier to do these after a win, but that's okay. So, Kentucky did do some good things. I think they just kind of ran out of gas in the second half. Georgia kind of did to them what they've done to just about everybody, with the exception of Auburn. They just wear you down, and then they just kind of run you over in the second half, and that's basically what happened.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Georgia can do, especially in an SEC championship game situation, and if they get to a college football playoff, or if they play a high-level team in a bowl game that's not necessarily going to get pushed around like some of the teams that they've beaten. You mentioned the Auburn game. The Tigers certainly at the front to stall this running game and hold Sony Michel and Nick Chubb each to like 25 or 30 yards rushing, but every other game has followed the script, with Jake Fromm only needing to throw 14 times. Nick Chubb ripped it up for $151, and Sony Michel had 97. DeAndre Swift had 66 yards on only 7 carries. So they pretty much, even though the Kentucky defensive front held up for much of the game, they just pound away. And if your offense isn't good enough to separate, then this is what you get in the second half, is a lot of Nick Chubb and Sony Michel and a lot of pushing and wearing down on that offensive line.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, Kentucky, they tried to run the ball with Benny Snell and Siam King, tried to do some clock management, but they just, as I said, they just got tired. And, I don't know if you saw the one play where Steven Johnson basically got body slammed by one of the Georgia defensive linemen. And I was like, how's it not a penalty? But anyway.
That's funny you bring that up, Kevin, not to interrupt, but I was watching the game. I saw probably 3/4 of the game. And on that particular play, no one, sometimes you'll see the officials miss a play, but the announcers will catch it. And even if it's missed throughout the entire, portion of the game by the referees, that the announcers will catch it. Nobody saw it, and they showed replay after replay, and you see kind of off in the corner, they were focused on the line of scrimmage and what was going on with the placement of the ball, where it was just body slammed off the corner, and there was no penalty for that. And usually if there's excessive, you can't just take any player, especially the quarterback, and just body slam him like a wrestler.
Right, yeah. I thought, there's supposed to be rules for that, but you brought up the announcers. It's kind of funny. This is the one. Kentucky's one game on CBS this year, and Gary Danielson called. I don't know. He called Eddie Gran everything but Eddie Gran. I think he called him Eddie Gann. He called him Eddie Grant. I think he called him. So, but yeah, like I said, nobody seemed to catch that play. We were sitting here like with my son, we're watching the game, and we're like, what happened? Like, because you could see it in the corner of your eye if you're watching. And like, how did nobody see that? But that's what happens. It's part of football. Like I said, there's supposed to be rules against that now. But as you said, nobody saw that. It was just really weird. But it was just one of those freak plays. But like I said, despite the bad outcome today, Kentucky, as you said, is still 7-4. They're going to a bowl game for a second straight year. They're going to finish. They finished 500 in the SEC for the 2 years in a row for the first time since the 70s. So they're still Stoops is building something every year. They're obviously not quite to the level of Georgia. And we all thought this was the year they were going to beat Florida, and that didn't happen. But they did beat Tennessee this year, and they beat South Carolina for a 4th year in a row. So they're making steps, but it's it's an ongoing process. And as you said, you just see, especially in that second half, you could just see the difference in the teams. Like I said, Georgia with Chubb and Michel, and then the third string back who had, I think, what'd you say, like 70 yards, I believe. That's just what they that's what I said. That's what they do. So, like I said, now for Kentucky, they just look forward to the game next week with Lamar Jackson and the battle for the Governor's Cup.
See, when somebody says that a particular team's competitive against another team, you can take that to varying degrees on the spectrum. Some people mean that that has to be taken to the final possession, but I would consider this to be a competitive game for close to 3 quarters, in which Kentucky got it from a 21-6 game to 21-13. Even when it was 28-13 within 2 scores, they had some chances to do something and get it even closer. So it wasn't a classic, like if you take Kentucky during its downtime, and you could probably run off the scores of games that this was the script. Kentucky goes out and it's 28-0 at the end of the first quarter against a Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, somebody like that, and that's all there is, and there's no competition involved at all. Yes, there is still a significant separation between the roster depth and the top end talent of these two teams, but Mark Stoops has done an exceptional job, and that is another one of the themes of the conversation throughout the game was Mark Stoops building this program, getting it to a certain level, it being much more competitive than it's been. Now what is going to happen after this, and when is that signature win going to come? Well, it can't necessarily come in the SEC this season, of course, but maybe a bowl victory, maybe sometime next season they can beat one of the better teams in the SEC Eastern Division.
Right, yeah. I mean, some people would look at the Tennessee game, even though Tennessee's way down this year, but it's only the second time since 1984 that Kentucky's has beat Tennessee. But as you said, last year they almost beat Georgia. They probably should have. They let them drive the field at the end of the game to win it. But as you said, I think it's one of those, they're going to pick off somebody next, maybe like you said, maybe it's next year. I think they play. I believe it's Texas A&M, I think, is the team that rotates in next year out of the SEC West. So, but as you said, it was competitive. You go back to that first quarter, the first possession, Josh Allen intercepts a pass, and everybody's thinking, okay, well, we're on to something here. But, they only got a field goal out of it. And then the next possession, they held, Georgia to 3 and out and got that really bad roughing the kicker penalty on a punt, which gave Georgia – first down, and then give them the ball right back, and they marched down and got a touchdown. And then the next time Kentucky had the ball back, drove it down the field, but again stalled and had to settle for a field goal. You punch one of those two in, and you're talking an even closer game. And then what's been Kentucky's Achilles, for lack of a better term, this season is the end of the first half. It was 14-6. Kentucky had the ball, and they went 3 and out, and there was about 3 minutes left on the clock, and Georgia took it right down. Scored, and it was 21-6. Then, as you said, Kentucky came back and scored at the beginning of the second half, and then Georgia came right back, and then from then on, it was just the wear and tear, and they just wore them down, and that was pretty much, I just said, the ball game. But like I said, was talking to somebody earlier today, like via Twitter, and they were saying, this used to be, every game. As you just said, Kentucky would be behind 28-0 at the end of the first quarter, 42-3 at the half, so it's definitely, as the announcer said, they're definitely, they're making strides. It's just, in the SEC, it's a long, to quote an old ACD song, rest in peace, Malcolm Young, it's a long way to the top.
Yes, that's another story outside the sports realm from today that's quite newsworthy. Kentucky goes down to Georgia 42-13, competitive first half into the third quarter. Then the Bulldogs just wear them down with Nick Chubb and company rolling up a huge rushing yardage. Kevin, you know what the situation is for a lot of college football fans. They're not going to see a Kentucky week to week or maybe the entire season, like you just noted. First game on CBS was against Georgia. They showed us some good things. They show us that they have a ways to go to play with a top 10 team in the country. But they've got Louisville next week. A lot of people lock in on the big rivalry games. That's certainly one of them, with the Cardinals and Heisman Trophy winner from last year, Lamar Jackson, coming to town. And then the bowl game, in which, a guy like myself sees a lot of teams for the first or second or third time during bowl season that I can't see week to week. So I see Josh Allen's one of your better players on defense. He's got 10.5 tackles for loss and 7 sacks. It was good to see Mike Edwards get back on the field. He's been nicked up with injuries recently, but leads the team in tackles. And even going into this season was a known commodity as one of the better players in the SEC. So who were some of those players that some of us should look out for in watching Kentucky play its last two games of the year?
Well, I mean, you hit on two of them right off the bat with Josh Allen and also with Mike Edwards. And the Kentucky, they have what they like to call the Blitz brothers with Josh Allen and Jordan Jones. Jones was an All-SEC linebacker preseason, but he was had a shoulder injury and missed a few games. And then they also have Denzel Ware in there. Those three guys. The linebackers. The linebackers have been the strong suit of this team. This year, with Allen and Jones and Denzel Ware, and then Josh Paschal is a true freshman who's done some really good things. Those are the guys, defensive wise. And as you said, Mike Edwards, has been good this year. The secondary has not been what we thought. We talked back in August, probably before the season started, about how we thought Kentucky's, the secondary was going to be the calling card for the defense, and it's not really turned out to be the case. It's been the linebackers. And then, on the other side of the ball, obviously, Benny Snell is the guy who pretty much, stirs the drink, so to speak. He got one touchdown rush for, I think it was 94 yards and a touchdown today. So he's only a sophomore, and he's already set the UK career record with touchdowns. I think today was his 28th, 29th. And he's just won off the regular season touchdown mark set by Mo Williams back in 1995. I think today was he has 16. Mo Williams had 17, and he's got the Louisville game plus the bowl game still to go. And then Stephen Johnson, the quarterback, has done a lot of great things this year. And another guy, C.J. Conrad, tight end, is one of the best tight ends in the SEC. Of course, he went down with an injury. Have not heard anything about how significant it is. Kentucky's been hit hard at the tight end. They had, Nick Haynes, an offensive lineman, who was wearing number 89 today. He was, a tight end if they needed him out there. So that's one area. But, those are three guys, Johnson and Snell, and then along with Conrad, and then Garrett Juice Johnson, wide receiver. He's just solid every game, has a good game just about every week. He's one of the all-time. He's in the top 5 now, I think, as far as like receptions, in Kentucky history. So, I mean, those are the guys. If you're watching the Louisville game next week and it's the first time you're seeing Kentucky, those are the guys that you would want to key on, because those are the keys, on offense and defense.
Kevin McGuffey joining us from Last Word on College Football. The Cats go down to the Georgia Bulldogs 42-13, but still strong at 7-4, matching up against their traditional rival next week at home at the Commonwealth. 7-4 Louisville comes to town. It was an interesting game last year in which the Cardinals were that close to beating Clemson. They had just lost to Houston, but they had played most of its season eyeing an ACC championship and a college football playoff appearance, and they wilted down the stretch, losing in particular to Kentucky. A bit of a surprise to a lot of people as a double-digit favorite, 41-38. Stephen Johnson had a big game, 338 yards passing. Lamar Jackson had his typical 450-plus yards of total offense, but Kentucky picked him off 3 times, and really a big win for Mark Stoops in this rivalry game. And, Kevin, we've kind of referenced a few measuring sticks, Tennessee, Georgia. This is another one for Kentucky, and I'll be interested to see how the Cats fare against the Cardinals, because this Louisville team has maybe the best quarterback in the country. They're diverse on offense. They have a number of playmakers on offense. They're spotty on defense. They're really not that good. They somehow held Syracuse to 3 points today. I know they were up 42-3 late in that game, but they've been pretty awful on defense most of this season, and that's been their downfall. And, of course, the Cats beat them last year. Now, here's another not elite program, but a very good program, a good team with talent that Kentucky can match itself up against and see how much progress this team has made. Oh, yeah, you're exactly right. As you said, Kentucky was a, 2-3 touchdown underdog last year, and came in and shocked the world, 141-38. Lamar Jackson, he said, had the interceptions, and he had a fumble late in the game where Kentucky got it, drove down. Oscar McGinnis hit a field goal to win the game. Beating Louisville 2 years in a row, I think, would be huge. I just said it may not be it's not an SEC, but still, you're beating your in-state rival, 2 years in a row. And that would just be another step, for Stoops. And if they do win on Saturday,
it'll be Kentucky's first 8-win regular season since 1984. So, that's something, something definitely to, obviously you want to win, to beat your in-state rival, but that's something to shoot for. Like I said, first 8-win season in 33 years would be very, very, very impressive, for this coaching staff. And I expect it to be a shootout. Last year's game was a shootout. As you said, Kentucky, Louisville has not been good on defense. They were really good today, as you said, against Syracuse. And, Kentucky's been great against the run. You throw out today's game, they were, I think, 19th in the nation coming in rushing defense, but, they've been susceptible to the pass as well. I could see a, 38, 34, 42, 38 games, similar to what happened last year in the game next weekend. So, and the fact that it's at Kroger Field, still getting used to saying Kroger Field. I want to say, Commonwealth Stadium, but, they'll have the Big Blue Nation there in force to root them on. Like I said, it should be a really good game. I just go ahead and say now, I think Kentucky wins. So, and, they get that 8-win season, and then we'll see where they end up with the bowl game. Right now, all of the buzz, seems to be to the Liberty Bowl, in Memphis. They're really, 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 really high on having Kentucky back. I think 2008 or 2009, Kentucky last played in the Liberty Bowl. There's a couple other games, the Belk Bowl, the Music City Bowl also. But the problem that they're running into is that those times, it's December 29th, it's the same time as the UK U of L basketball game. And, it's not a total deal breaker, but they would like to have, not have that going, those games, competing against each other, which of course, brings up the point, why are you playing the basketball game at 1:00 on a Friday afternoon? But it's a CBS, it's a CBS call. They set the time and the date for that game. So, but like I said, right now it seems to be a Liberty Bowl where they're headed. There's an outside chance an 8-win Kentucky team could maybe make an Outback Bowl. It's highly doubtful, but there's still there's always a chance, I guess. So, which would be 20 years from the last time Kentucky played in the Outback Bowl in 1998 when they lost to Penn State.
I remember that one with Tim Couch at quarterback. I think the final score was, and I'm just a total nerd and geek. You can laugh at me, Kevin, when it comes to scores and remembering scores, especially from my heyday. 26-14. I would almost put money on that final score, Kentucky in the Outback Bowl against Penn State.
And you would be correct. That was the score of the game. So.
I've got some bold projections here, Kevin, in front of me that really line up with what you're talking about here. CBS Sports says Kentucky, Iowa, Music City Bowl. Sports Illustrated has Kentucky, West Virginia, Liberty. SB Nation, also a Liberty Bowl matchup against Iowa State. And two particular writers at ESPN have Kentucky, Georgia Tech. I think we've already seen that game in the Music City Bowl. And also, Kentucky, Georgia Tech in the Belk Bowl. I don't want to see rematches in bowl games, especially not unless they have to be played, a national championship semifinal or something like that. But we saw Kentucky and Georgia Tech matchup last year. It's intriguing to see the ACC and the SEC get together, but they do so much during the regular season. I would love to see a game against the Big 12 or the Big 10 in particular. But Kentucky, nice little run here at 7-4. They've certainly, it's an interesting setup, I think, Kevin, in the SEC Eastern Division, because Georgia, Tennessee, Florida have owned that division for so long in various combinations. And now Florida's won the division 2 straight years, but Tennessee was right there. Now Georgia seems to be clearly the team with the ascension, not just in terms of record, but with the recruiting classes being what they were last year and projected to be in 2018. Georgia seems like it could separate itself permanently. Then you've got Kentucky, South Carolina, Vandy, Mizzou, and obviously Mizzou had a nice 2-year run, but they're all mixed together. And now it looks as though Kentucky, maybe South Carolina, have that opportunity to even emerge past Tennessee and Florida for the next few years.
Yeah, and who would have ever, as you said, who would have ever thought that? I say Kentucky, Kentucky beat Tennessee this year. It should have beat Florida. They did beat Missouri, beat South Carolina, and they beat Vandy. So, yeah, I mean, as you said, right now, Georgia appears to be head and shoulders above everyone else in the SEC East, and everybody else is kind of fighting for second place. And, right now, I guess, South Carolina is probably going to end up finishing second, which is, frustrating, I guess, to Kentucky fans since Kentucky beat them. But, yeah, like I said, Kentucky, as you said, Kentucky, Missouri, started off so horribly, and then, Drew Lock has just been on an amazing run the last few games. I haven't seen a score yet of course, it's just getting started, I think, as we're talking with that game against Vandy. But yeah, like I said, second place, everything is just kind of up for grabs right now. As you said, I think Georgia is head and shoulders above everybody. But, there's no reason, like right now, 7 to 8 wins every season. I mean, Kentucky fans have I couldn't tell you a Kentucky fan that wouldn't be happy with that. Make 6, 7, even 6 wins, go 6-6 occasionally. The schedule I think is going to be a little bit more difficult next year. They've been helped by the fact that this schedule for 2017 has set up as one of the best ones, SEC wise they've ever had. But yeah, like I said, 6, 7, 8 wins. Going to a bowl game every year. I mean, I don't know any Kentucky fan that wouldn't be thrilled to death with it.
All right, Mark Stoops doing a heck of a job at Kentucky. He's recruited West Virginia and Ohio in particular, in addition to the South, to go some different avenues more successfully than previous Kentucky coaches. And the Wildcats certainly showing it on the field. And we're even saying that following a 29-point loss against Georgia, in which the team looked right there playing toe-to-toe for about 2.5 quarters before the Georgia talent and certainly the muscle up front along the offensive line and in the backfield took hold. And Kentucky eyeing its matchup now against old rival Louisville at home next week. Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football. Please join him and the rest of the crew breaking down college football week to week right there at Last Word on College Football. Kevin, couldn't have done it without you. Appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Mark. I always enjoy it. I always love to talk football with you.